If I told you, if I told you just half of everything I've always wanted to.
Welcome back, Camille. Almost 2 years ago, I got a medical marijuana prescription, and I get a lot of questions about it, and there's a lot of stigma around moms who smoke. So I wanted to come on here to talk about it and answer some of your questions. First off, I want to give a disclaimer. I am not here to encourage smoking, especially to people who are underage and can't do so legally. The point of this video is to be informative and to share my experience with medical marijuana. Prior to getting my prescription, I had smoked before, the first time being when I was 16. It definitely became my whole personality for a while, and I would do it recreationally with friends. The effect that it had on me back then was definitely much different than the way it affects me now. Part of that has to do with the amount that I was smoking. I was never really mindful about how much might be too much for me. I honestly just wanted to look cool by smoking as much as possible. I didn't really look that cool. Not long after that, though, did I get pregnant and, of course, stopped smoking. After Coco was born, when she was about 6 months old, I think that's the first time I smoked again. And it's just something that me and Landon liked to do together, pretty much whenever we could get someone to watch Colette for us. If we had some alone time together, we were likely gonna smoke a little bit and have a good time. This time doing so much more controlled and much more responsibly, and never around Colette. And then I was pregnant again, didn't smoke again, and soon after Delilah was born, Landon passed away, which was obviously a very, very traumatic event for me. I moved from Texas to Florida to be with my family, and at that point it had been over a year since I last smoked. I was honestly kind of nervous about smoking again, one, because it had been so long, and two, because that was something that me and Landon did together. I hadn't smoked without him in years. So even though I wasn't breastfeeding anymore, I was kind of apprehensive about picking it up again. But I started to learn more and more about the medical use of marijuana and the potential it had to help with some of the symptoms I was experiencing. I've had anxiety and depression since I was 14 years old, honestly before that, but that's when I got diagnosed. And on top of that was now dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, which manifested in a lot of different ways, but the biggest one had to do with my sleep. I'd have a really, really hard time falling asleep, and when I did sleep, I often had very terrible, gruesome nightmares. I didn't want to fall asleep because I knew what was going to happen when I did. I was also having panic attacks a lot, just generally very anxious all the time. And because Landon was addicted to his medication, I was very reluctant to go down, the traditional route of medicating for that, being like an anti-anxiety medication like Xanax. I knew I didn't want to risk getting addicted to that. So eventually I decided to schedule a consultation. In Florida, you have to be at least 18 to get a medical marijuana prescription. I was 19 at the time, and the appointment was really laid back, yet very informative. I talked to my doctor about all the different ways I could use to dose myself. Edibles, syringes, flour, dabs. They had pretty much everything you can think of. And I explained the specific problems I was having, and based on that, got a personalized dosage and prescription. So the course of action that they decided to go with was for me to smoke some flower every night, just a little bit, some indica. Indica is known to kind of mellow you out and make you more tired, while sativa is kind of more uppity. So I was told to smoke a little indica before bed to help me fall asleep and to help with the nightmares. One of the biggest reasons I decided to go down this route in the first place is because I knew from past experience when I would smoke I wouldn't dream. That's not true for everyone, but that's true for me. I would fall asleep super easily and wake up and have not dreamt or not remember my dreams. So that fixed that issue. And then I also got prescribed a dab pen which was sativa, because that was for me to smoke during the day if I needed to, kind of in case of emergency type of thing. If I was really anxious, if I felt like I was about to have a panic attack, I would take one hit off of the dab pen and just be okay, or more okay than I was. It really helped my anxiety going from just jittery anxiety to a full-fledged panic attack. When it comes to THC and anxiety, everyone reacts really differently. Some people it makes them very anxious, and some people it calms their anxiety. When I would smoke before, I would get really anxious, but that's because, like I said, I wasn't thinking about how much I was smoking. I was probably smoking too much. When I smoked too much, I definitely got anxious. And also, I was just in these like weird social situations around a crowd that I shouldn't have been hanging around. And that itself just kind of made me anxious because I already have social anxiety. But now that I was dosing it properly and had built up a tolerance, it affected my anxiety in a way that it was still there and I was still aware of it, but it took away like the seriousness of it. It didn't feel like life or death anymore. It's like, oh, I know this is a problem. This is something that's making me anxious, but it kind of removes my ability to like care about it too much to the point where I start spinning out. And my doctor who prescribed this to me, she knew I had kids. That's something we talked about. Because I was 19 at the time, I had a lesser dosage than someone who was 21 would get. That just limited the amount of weed that I could buy at a time. So after I talked through all that with my doctor, I got my card and went to the dispensary, which there's one just 30 minutes from me. And just as she said, there was lots to choose from. I got my flower and I got my dab pen, and I also got some CBD. And that was prescribed for me to take every morning, kind of like a vitamin. There's a lot of stigma around moms who smoke cannabis. There's a lot of reasons for that, which go back years in history as to why culturally we've just decided that smoking is way worse than drinking. In reality, alcohol is so much more dangerous. The amount of people who die every day from alcohol, overdosing on alcohol, drinking and driving, it's statistically way more dangerous. Yet people villainize moms who smoke. If I were to say, yeah, my favorite way to wind down before bed is to drink a glass of wine, no one would bat an eye. No one would question my abilities as a parent. That is something that is very culturally normal and acceptable. But what people aren't considering is the dosage. Because drinking a glass of wine versus 2 bottles of wine is very different. But a lot of people try smoking once and get very high. And typically, anyone's first time smoking will leave them very intoxicated, completely out of their normal state of mind, especially being that it's a very new experience. So people who have only tried it once and made up their mind about it, I can understand why it's hard for them to comprehend that it's not always like that. Once you build a tolerance to it, it does not affect your body and your mind in the same way. Being that I was prescribed to smoke every night, I built a tolerance to it. In the same way that an experienced drinker can have one drink and still be perfectly sober, an experienced smoker can take one hit and still be sober and just mellowed out. So especially when I would have that one hit of a dab pen every so often during the day when I was anxious, it's not like all of a sudden I was like super blazed and my eyes were red and I needed to like lay down, and no. So I really think that's where a lot of that stigma comes from. People don't understand the concept of smoking a little bit and not really getting that high, which, if smoking your prescription as prescribed, is exactly the way it should be. That's how it goes. The number one question I get as a mom who smokes is, do I do it around the kids? And no, the kids have never seen me smoke. I hit my bong at night. That's kind of my preferred method, is just packing a bowl before bed, taking a little hit and going inside. And that obviously doesn't happen until they're asleep. And during the day, when needed, I'll sneak away and hit my pen where they can't see me, just as I would sneak away to the bathroom. If you don't know what a dab pen is, it's like similar to a vape. It's just a tiny little device, very discreet. So no, they never see me smoke, nor am I ever like belligerently high around them to the point where they could like notice a difference in my demeanor and like think I'm acting weird or anything like that. If they're noticing anything, they're just noticing the difference of me being anxious to all of a sudden me being back to normal. But yeah, it's something that at the age that they're at, I don't feel a need to expose them to this and explain it to them. But I am a firm believer in not hiding things from my kid. I've always approached that aspect of parenting with exposing them to things at an age-appropriate level and just explaining how the world works in a very neutral way. I'd much rather teach my kids that certain things are meant for adults, certain words are meant for adults, certain beverages are meant for adults, certain TV shows are only meant for adults, rather than trying to completely shelter them from anything like that. Because regardless if you like it or not, your kids will see things in the world. And if you're not the one to explain it to them, maybe someone else will, or maybe they'll just be really confused. And so as their parent, I take it upon myself to be the one to educate them on everything. So if they were to learn of me smoking or see someone else smoking and they had any questions about it, I would be completely open and honest and explain that it's something that adults do. Just another one of those things. But at this age, since there's really no reason to explain that to them quite yet, I'm going to continue kind of sneaking off to smoke. But no, it's not something that I'm going to shelter them from forever. Another question that I got asked a lot was about dependency on it and whether or not it's addictive. I look at it as the same way I look at my antidepressants. It's a tool that I use until I no longer need it. So in a way, I do kind of depend on it for now. I wouldn't say it's necessary for me at this time, but it's definitely a clutch. And if I were to stop taking my antidepressants tomorrow, I would have withdrawal symptoms. I would have a headache and feel kind of nauseous for a few days, and my body would adjust to not having those chemicals anymore. It's just the same with cannabis. If I stopped smoking cold turkey, especially after smoking every night, I would have a really hard time falling asleep. I'd probably have a very vivid dream that I remember fully in detail. I'd probably be a little more anxious, and I'd probably have less of an appetite. But those are all things that would completely go away in a week. If I didn't smoke for a week straight, I'd pretty much be balanced out and back to normal. So whatever like withdrawal symptoms there are from that, they don't last very long, and they aren't super extreme. Whereas other drugs, there's some crazy, serious withdrawal symptoms. So is my body a little dependent on it right now? Yeah, kind of. But the definition of addiction, as I've come to know it, being in a rehabilitation center before, most addicts define addiction as your life becoming completely unmanageable due to this substance. It's causing problems for you and getting in the way of your normal life. Addictions ruin your relationships. They keep you from truly being happy when you're not on substances. It takes over your brain. It's all you think about. And I've quit smoking pretty easily several times in my life. And it's one of those things where when I don't smoke for like a few weeks, I completely forget about it. The urge to smoke just kind of goes away. It is actually much less addictive than alcohol. If you drink a certain amount of alcohol every day and your body gets used to that, and then you all of a sudden stop, it could kill you. And again, the double standard there shouldn't be so much of a stigma around weed when we treat alcohol like it's nothing. Luckily, things are starting to change a little bit though, especially as marijuana's being legalized more and more. I think as a society, we're starting to realize that it's not as bad as it's made out to be. It's not this hardcore drug that deserves to be on the same level and treated as cocaine, for example. When I go to the dispensary, I know exactly how much THC is in the product that I'm consuming. I know how much I should smoke. I know how much it'll affect me. It's all in my control. Just as I know how I'm going to feel after 1 beer versus 2 versus 3, I know how 1 hit versus half a joint versus a whole joint is going to affect me. It's not all or nothing, high or not high. There's a middle ground there. And in that middle ground, that's where you find what medical marijuana is all about. And as far as managing my symptoms, making sure I can sleep, making sure I don't have nightmares, being able to calm down and relax when I need to, and being able to have an appetite when I'm depressed, whereas usually I'd have a really hard time eating. That's what it's about for me. I'm so grateful that I'm able to manage those symptoms in a way that's natural with a plant that comes from the earth, especially with my trauma around pharmaceuticals. It's really just helped me so much. Again, I don't say all this to try and convince anyone to go out and self-medicate. If you think it would help you and it's legal in your state, I would definitely look into it. But again, please do so legally, responsibly. Remember that there's a reason why no one under the age of 18 should be smoking. And I also want to add that it can damage your lungs. Obviously, there's other ways to ingest THC, but if you're smoking it, remember that that does have an effect on your lungs. So just something to keep in mind. I couldn't speak on this without adding that. With all that being said, I really do hope we can change the stigma. Medicating with cannabis does not make you a bad parent, just as having a drink doesn't make you a bad parent. It's all about doing so intentionally and responsibly. That's what makes the difference there. That's all for today. I hope you guys stay safe out there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, Camly.